I get chills because that happened to me so many times I don't remember. A black father beating his 2 black sons for stealing in a store. Now the fathers go to jail. Not because he's black, but because you can't beat kids. You don't have the right to beat kids anymore, your own kids. It's a good thing that this law is now and not when I was raising our kids. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Don't discipline your kids. Your kids turn out to be weak pieces of dog shit. Still no president, although inevitable looks like it's taking place, that Mr. Biden will be our next president. We'll see. It shows a good example of the difference between an alpha male Trump personality and the rest of the world. Don't confuse me with the fucking facts. And you've been raised all your lives the opposite. Has anybody been raised in this fucking room? Don't confuse me with the facts even when I'm wrong. No, I am exactly the same. Steve Jobs was exactly the same. Bill Gates is exactly the same. Warren Buffett is exactly the same. Success leaves clues, kids, and those other people that I mentioned aren't alpha males. The good news is, the best news for the people that are here today is that 98% of all the high performance people in the world are introverts. I'm gonna say it real slow. Does everybody verstehen, everybody that English isn't a primary language, everybody understand introvert like you? Some would say introvert cunt pussy, but I'm not gonna say that. That's a little early. But if 98% of the high performance people are introverts, and there's only 2% that pretend to be alpha males, like myself, and of that 10%, or that 2%, 10% are real alpha males, like me and Mr. Trump. But Mr. Trump already knows, even on a subconscious level, he won't allow himself to recognize the fact that he's probably lost the election. Hence, he doesn't give up, which is not 100% the opposite of you, but almost 100% the opposite of you. When I say you, I mean you happen to be the 20 meatheads that are in the room, but I mean it's every group. It's not like, well, that's not true. In the 90s, they were different. The men had bigger balls, or I don't know what it was, but now we're dealing in this century, so I can't keep reverting back to the 90s, although most of my billionaires come from the 90s, which is a good fact. We go over why during the whole seminar. We go over why ad nauseum. You'll hear these fucking facts so much you'll be sick to your stomach. And the reason I repeat them, I said last night, not hundreds of times, but 100 times, certain things, i.e. you're not gonna follow the steps because you're not gonna follow the steps. And even though I know after 27 and a half years that me pounding you about not following the steps does not get you to follow the steps anymore. Because most people that even spend the money, although I don't consider this any money, spend the money to come here are pretenders, pleasers. You'd rather be liked than effective. The most insulting thing you can tell me is when you leave here, you like me, because it means I didn't do my job. And isn't the whole world just the opposite of that? Not the whole world, but most of the world. It's opposite. Some people say, we had a guy named Sean Casey who's still around, who I trained, who used to be CEO of one of my companies many years ago in the 90s. He says the QLA seminar is how to piss people off and get what you want. And I thought about that, and in the 90s when he said it, he was pretty insightful actually. I didn't want to admit that at the time, but he's pretty goddamn insightful. Because most of the people that you will go back to, your default, are gonna hate the new you. Not all of them, some of them will pretend, because they want to be liked too. So they're not gonna tell you you're full of shit, kid. They're not gonna tell you you're full of shit, old timer. Even though they think, what the fuck's wrong with this guy? And for those of you that have employees, that have a business, they're gonna think, I can't wait till he goes to another course, and this shit wears off. I alluded to it last night. I've been going through a series of interviews for a major newspaper article. It'll come out sometime between now and Christmas. If we don't go to war with Putin, and then it'll be cut and thrown on the floor of the newsroom, and it has not made me, but it has allowed me to go back and recall a lot of the shit that I've done over my 50-year career, because they're asking me a lot of questions. And one of the things that I'm absolute death on is people that give me bullshit, so I don't give out bullshit. I give out accurate information even if it hurts. And you're just the opposite. You would shade. You would twist the facts to make you look as good as possible, just as your mother and father did. And look where that got you. And I will say at least 25 to 50 times during this week, well, that sounds fine, but how has your program worked out so far? That's my retort to almost everything. And it works, because if you answer candidly with yourself, I don't like to use the word honestly. It's like here in Europe, I had never heard before when they say, will to be honest with you, Mr. Pena. What? What do you mean? Well, what have you been up to now? So it's like in court, are you lying now, Mr. Pena, or did you lie then? Well, if you're honest with yourself, I like to use the word candid, you know that you've been raised to be a pleaser. When you go off to school, grammar school, and one of the things that the newspaper reporters have asked me, do you remember school? And I said, yeah, in East LA. And I said, my mother used to walk me to within about a half a block of the school with my little hand. And then she'd watch me as I disappeared onto the school grounds. But her words to me were, stay out of trouble, keep your head down, don't talk, blah, 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 trying to protect me. Well, fortunately, I didn't listen to her. But most parents do. Well, most parents take their little kids the first day of school. And so I recall that even though it seemed like 2 miles to go to school, it was only 3 blocks from my house, 3 blocks. And the church that I had my first communion and that kind of thing, and where I wanted to become a priest when I was in grammar school, is about another 3 blocks, St. Anne's. They're still there. School and the church is still there. And so they've asked me questions. Also, that school is the school that I dropped out of a window, an aquarium, about a 35 pound aquarium, trying to kill my teacher when I was in grade school. These things have been brought up, not dredged up, because I wanted to give accurate information. So I've gone back and I've looked at my files, and I didn't take notes when I was in grammar school, but I went back and looked at pictures. I don't know if your families have these albums. You know, you open up these big kind of albums and they got pictures glued to the pages and shit like that. Well, we got about 20 jillion of them. And so it took me a couple days to go through all the albums. We got about 35 or 40 albums. 99% of everything that I saw in the album I could recall, brought back. I remembered the picture, the actual picture. And normally when you're 3, 4, 5 years old, you're not supposed to be able to do that. Your cognitive powers aren't developed enough. But I do remember stuff 3, 4, 5 years old. So it's brought a lot of this up. And so I'm hoping that the article is not a hatchet job on me, giving them names of people to interview. One of which, the guy that is still alive, the only guy that's still alive that I've known most of my life, and I've known him since I'm about 8 or 9. I gave them my kid brother, who's a very successful guy. He's the number 2 guy in the Los Angeles County Fire Department. I gave him a couple mentees that I trained here in the 90s, both of which are Latinos, because I thought that's what the article was bent towards. The original article was a front page article in the LA Times in 1983 that we got a Pulitzer Prize for. I didn't get any. I'm just featured in the article. I didn't write any of it. And the things that have come back through the question process of the fine reporter, who happened to be one of the most junior reporters on that article that won the Pulitzer Prize in 1983. And it's pretty obvious the reporter and I, and if you're listening to this, Louis, are looking at through the spyglass through different ends, I'm still hopeful. And when you get out and when we talk about the kids that are out there in the trenches right now in the Corona era doing deals, and I still say this, even though it's Corona, we plan for the worst and hope for the best. All our planning is we plan for the best. We expect the best out of you as a human being. We expect you to be honest, etc., but we plan for the fucking worst because you're not honest. And when push comes to fucking shove, you will lie, cheat, and even steal and sometimes kill to get your way. And I know that. Having lived 3/4 of a century and we have 3 million pores, and I've said this a zillion times on YouTube, 3 million pores in our body. And I might have said it last night, I've been fucked in every one of them at least twice. And the higher you go up the food chain, i.e. the more money you make, the more they try to stick their willy in your pores. The higher you go up the food chain, the more they try to fuck you. And most of the people that come to the seminar aren't prepared for that because you're weak. Some of you in this room probably haven't even considered yourself to be weak, but you're not up here looking at you. Yet we turn people like you into gazillionaires. How is that possible, Mr. Pena? And that's one of the questions that they asked me about the article. And I said, if I could make a pill, it's like if I could find a pill that really worked for diets, that not make you want to eat and eat, I'd be a gazillionaire, right? Although we all know, reduce calories, more exercise, right? And that's how you don't turn into a tub of shit, right? Yet 40% of America and around 40% of Britain are overweight. They're obese, not overweight, obese. And for those of you that are young in the room, you're all young to me, you have no idea when you get older how much more difficult it is to burn off calories. You don't have a fucking clue. You hear people talk about it all the time. But I remember when I came back from the military, just at the beginning of 1970, I drove up to my mom's house. I was going to surprise her. I'd driven all the way across country from New Jersey to Los Angeles. And she gets out of the car, and only as I can do, I said, "Mom, you put on weight." I hadn't seen her in 4 years. Well, why did I say that? And my mother retorted back, she was just about to turn 50. "I hope I'm still alive when you turn 50. And she was, and she was right. I mean, the calories jump on my belly. Long time ago when I was in high school, a very poor athlete, there used to be some kind of rule of thumb. Make sure your chest measurement is at least 10 inches bigger than your waist measurement. That's the only thing I remember from those days. Mine is, but just barely now. It's a bitch. Last night, we saw the founder, and we'll talk about that in a minute, who was a prick. Because I've changed the format, I tried to find some super icons that weren't pricks. As they say in this part of the world, I couldn't. find one. We found some mediocre kind of guys that, but they were also Rands when you compare them to Jobs. They were also Rands when you compare them to Bill Gates. They were also Rands. Sometimes during the course of the lecture, the next few days, you'll Google fuck. You waste time. So don't Google. It's a waste of time. Most of the stuff that you've Google fucked has been a waste of your time. Otherwise, why are you here? People only come to me for one or two reasons, desperation or inspiration. And there's not an inspired one of you in the room. And even though some of you that they say you're not desperate, you are, otherwise you wouldn't be here. I've said this a gazillion times. The world is flat, and I am the last town, the last bar in the last town on the edge of the world before you go off the precipice into the abyss. This is it. If you can't make this fucking thing work, you might as well, and metaphorically, because I would never want anybody to kill themselves, metaphorically blow your fucking brains out. And yet some of you won't be able to do it. You won't be able to do it not because it doesn't work, it's because you're not serious. And you would rather be liked more than you would like to be effective. This morning's pills, 90 pills. Why do I look like I do? Why are my bloods like of a 30-year-old? Not because of this. But I've been taking the pills so fucking long, I'm afraid to stop, truly. And for the two medical doctors in the room, I don't know if they work or not. I've been to some of the best, fanciest spa clinics in the world. La Clinique Paris in Switzerland. And the Swiss doctor, you are wasting your time, Mr. Pena. You are pissing it out in your urine. He's dead, by the way. He was 3 years younger than I am. When I went to Scripps Clinic, when I first got well, so to speak, bodily well, the young Adonis Swiss doctor, now again a Swiss guy, he looked like a fucking like a statue, the gods. And I had never known that your stool is supposed to be soft, because I ate mostly protein and I was always shitting hard bullets. And the first time I had a day of 24 hours of normal, healthy food, I thought something was wrong with my rectum. What the fuck? I mean, Jesus Christ, what's wrong? That's what Scripps Clinic, that was 1977. I've been taking pills like this since 1977. And for those of you that saw it online, and I announced it at the last seminar, well, my bloods are phenomenal. But I had a 75th birthday gift from my wife that we had all the MRIs, all the whole 9 yards, my whole body, and I listed about 15 tests, took 3 days. Fortunately, it was during lockdown, so the special clinics were empty. And they came back and they said, I hate this phrase, unremarkable, because that doesn't mean dog shit. That just lets the doctors off a hook. Well, if you're going to sue them for malpractice, except for about a third of the tests, it came back of a much younger man. I need to spend 100,000 pounds to tell me something I already know. I would rather give in the money to charity. But it was just, the 75th birthday, because as I said to somebody last night, there's people online saying I've got Parkinson's disease, I've got Alzheimer's, I've got this. I didn't do it for them. I did it because it was my 75th birthday. And that was the last thing that, in addition to a bunch of other stuff I didn't need, not the least of which is the new rolls out there, the QLA bespoke rolls that we had made down at the Rolls-Royce factory. But when you have a lot of money, you can do whatever the fuck you want. And the biggest difference between the audience, every audience I've ever spoke before, I've always got significantly more money than the whole audience cumulatively. Now the seminar is based, and has been based, and it is more based now on two people, Winston Churchill and Andrew Carnegie. Winston Churchill because he had a pair, Andrew Carnegie because I stolen his model. QLA is the Andrew Carnegie model. And why does Andrew Carnegie, father of our model? Because he didn't like equity investors, because he had to share the equity. That means he had to share the profits with somebody else. And he found borrowing from banks was a lot easier because there were no equity investors. But Mr. Churchill, who was anything but an appeaser, and there's a reason. Later in the seminar, and now we bring it up because especially what's happening in Corona, not because people are just afraid because they don't want to catch Corona from you, but that fear we're using as a lever to release them, a motivated seller, from their assets. We're never, I didn't think I'd ever live long enough to see this again. But this is the 80s on steroids. If you can't do it now, you should seriously consider the alternative that I mentioned when I first started speaking this morning. And Mr. Carnegie, I spent my 75th birthday at his home, Scuba Castle, a couple months ago. We stayed in his daughter's bedroom, quite unique. It's not as well appointed as Guthrie is. Unfortunately, you don't get to see too much of Guthrie because we're out here. I may be not the only, but one of the only physical setups that could still have this kind of gathering during Corona era, because I was going to tear this building down and put in a spa, put in an Olympic swimming pool. For whatever reason, I never got around to it. God works in mysterious ways, And so here we are, but we can be set up like this. Everybody's got their own bathroom, their own bedroom, yada, yada. Otherwise, we couldn't do this. Otherwise, we would have had to postpone the seminars. But interesting facts, his daughter's bedroom was next to his bedroom, and his wife's bedroom was like at the other end of the castle. You figure it out. No, they were married. He got married when he was 50 because he wanted a kid. And unfortunately for him, he had a daughter instead of a son. That was the plan. But there's some interesting facts. Number one, he's never been knighted, Andrew Carnegie. He's never got a title from Her Majesty or the King before current queen. For a guy that has done as much philanthropic work as he's done, I hadn't really thought about that, but he's never been knighted. He's never gotten one award from the government, not one, not even an honorable fucking mention, which leads you to believe legend of the reason why he gave his money away. Remember, success leaves clues. He gave his money away because he raped, murdered, and pillaged to get the money. And so he was trying to clean up his act before he died. And yet, when you go south of here about 30, 40 miles, you can't hardly find anything that doesn't have Carnegie on it. Because he was born in Dunfermline, which is about 35, 40 miles south of here. But another interesting fact is he bought his way out of the Civil War. He paid a guy $800, which is a lot of money then, to take his spot in the Civil War to fight for the North. I'm sure some of his guilt is associated with that. And the guy died. I wouldn't be telling the story if the guy lived. But the seminar is based on him and the fortitude and the grit of Mr. Churchill. Now, part of the history of this that I've gone back and dredged out the information for LA Times article is the first Rolls I ever had, which is That Is It. So I've been driving Rolls Royce since I'm about 25 and a half. So they're not so special to me. And why did I get that Rolls? And I still remember it was a $3,000 down payment and $279 a month. I remember it like I fucking took a shit this morning because I didn't have $3,000. I could generate the $279 a month cash. Because we had a salesman. Remember, success leaves clues. A sales manager who was a defrocked lawyer from Bolt Hall, Berkeley, named Kelly Norwood, who said, Pena, a young boy like you ought to sell everybody that comes through the door. I had a 94.6 closing ratio. And when we talk about setting standards and setting expectations, yours are all low. All you have to do is read your paperwork about what your goals are. Remember, I asked you, what's the most high-performing thing that you've done? Your slut girlfriend, your slut wife, your children, your parents. 0, 0, 0, nothing, 0, 0, nothing. I rest my case. And he said that you got to look better than the competition. All my competition in those days were driving Cadillac Sevilles and Lincoln Town Cars. But the owner of the company drove a Rolls, black, just like that one. So I went and bought a Rolls, didn't know how much I was going to be overextending myself when I did it, and I never looked back. Most of you, the kids talk about fake it till you make it. I don't like that, but perception is reality. Now, another thing that came up in the article, since I turned 60, 65, I've been to all these places. I knocked these all off my bucket list. The North and South Pole, big money to go there, big money. That's probably the most expensive on the Amazon River, the Nile, Taj Mahal, Colosseum in Rome, Machu Picchu, Petra, the Great Wall of China, Victoria Falls, Christ Redeemer, which is up in Sao Paulo, Brazil, the big statue, Mount Everest, I only made it to 18,900 feet, Grand Canyon, the Great Migration of Serengeti, blah, blah, blah. All those, that's at least $1 million, at least, probably $1.5 million. So that means I had enough discretionary, as you would call it, discretionary money to go and piss money down a rat hole for that shit. Most of you in this room haven't been to one of them. Now, Sally and I are glad that we did all this traveling. You can't go anyplace. One of the things I tell the kids, if you want to do it exactly like me, which I don't recommend, I spent 125% of every dollar I made until I was 60. So from the time I got out of university to the time I was 60, if I made $1 million, I spent $1.25 million. If I made $10 million, I spent $12.5 million. If I earned $100 million, I spent $125 million. I never saved a penny until I was 60 years old. Had no savings plan. You know how you're supposed to keep 6 months reserve bullshit? Never. You're supposed to save for college funds? Never. And part of that is Bunker Hunt, of the famous, infamous Hunts, the Hunt brothers, who went to jail for tampering with the silver market, which I unfortunately was part of. He said, Danny, if you're going to worry about paying taxes, you're not making enough fucking money. I never forgot that. Now I'm going to tell you a bunch of things, but you will not remember any of them. If you are worried about paying taxes, you're not making enough fucking money. If you've got backup plans, your backup plan will become your main plan. When I say euphemistically run towards the gunfire and kill everybody, I mean exactly that, run towards the gunfire, because there's never an easy time to make a hard decision. Now, when we're off of YouTube, we're going to show you the secret sauce of what the Corona kids are doing now. But another thing that came up from the research in the article, how do we make this... I get chills because that happened to me so many times I don't remember. A black father beating his 2 black sons for stealing in a store. Now the father'd go to jail. Not because he's black, but because you can't beat kids. You don't have the right to beat kids anymore, your own kids. It's a good thing that this law is now and not when I was raising our kids. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Don't discipline your kids. Your kids turn out to be weak pieces of dog shit. There are times for wisdom, there are times for love, but there are times for strength, which supersedes all. I'm going to prove to you without a shadow of a doubt that 50% of you are by accident, not just because you're 6 years apart from your brother or sister. I'm going to prove to you without even one little shadow of a doubt that love doesn't work. I'm going to prove to you that religion doesn't work. I'm going to prove to you everything that you've been taught, almost everything, doesn't work. Again, that's why you're here. The kids call it the new normal. I don't call it the new normal, I call it the next normal, because there's going to be another normal after this. Now, yesterday, quite quietly, it was announced the UK government is going to extend their payments to the people that are out of work until March. Now, think real carefully, meatheads. Do you know what the fuck that means? March! They were just hoping that it was going to run through December, so we'd have a nice Christmas. March! And they're being optimistic. I said last March that the world was going to spend 3 to 5 times more money than you thought, and it was going to take 3 to 5 times longer, and that we were going to have a second wave, a third wave, a fourth wave. And I took more shit. I called for negative oil. What did we get? Negative oil. I said we were going to sell fucking cruise ships for scrap metal. And what are we doing? We're selling $1 billion ships for $2 or $3 million for scrap metal. We're so fucked you couldn't sleep if you knew how fucked we are. I know how fucked we are. Warren Buffett doesn't sell all his airline stocks because he's stupid. You have no idea. Yet it is a perfect storm for us. Allah and his infinite fucking wisdom has brought us to these supply-demand lines crossing. And that's why the kids are crushing it. 95% of the questions you've ever thought about making money don't ever happen. Don't ever happen. We had a question last seminar, first time in 27 and a half years, somebody actually asked me a question that was new. First time in 27 and a half years that was new, that I had never heard before. And out of the mouths of babes, a little retard, fuck. With his 40 IQ, I'm exaggerating. Maybe he's got 60 IQ. But, okay, YouTube.